go fishing? He only had 2 worms. Yeah. So he also had to discipline the chickens on the ark because they were foul. All right, so we got another hour of this. So if you want, I'm just kidding. So luckily, the good news is Matt actually made up some class. So I'm just facilitating the questions, and we'll go from there. So we're going to watch a video. This first one is titled Literary Styles in the Bible, and we're going to have a discussion. So,
story from beginning to end. But all those books were written in different literary styles.
Yeah, think of it like walking into a bookstore where every aisle has a different kind of literature. There's history or poetry or nonfiction. And when you choose an aisle and pick up a book, you're going to have very different expectations, different things that you're looking for.
Right, they're all literature, but they communicate in really different ways.
Yes, and so the same thing is true for the Bible. If you don't pay attention to what style it's written in, you will miss out on the brilliance of each book.
So, what are the main types of literature in the Bible?
Well, first and foremost is narrative. It makes up a whopping 43% of the Bible. After that is poetry, which is 33% of the Bible. And then there's what you could call prose discourse, which makes up the remaining 24%.
Nearly half the Bible is narrative.
Yes, and this is no accident. Stories are the most universal form of human communication. Our brains are actually hardwired to take in information through kind of conflict.
Some challenge to overcome, just like in our own lives.
And that forces us to think about our own challenges, why there's so much pain or disappointment in the world, and then what can we do about it? And stories usually end with some kind of resolution, giving us hope for our own stories.
Since these are Bible stories, are the characters showing me how I should live?
Yeah, that's not quite the point. Most Bible characters are deeply flawed. You should not be like them. But we are supposed to see ourselves in them, which helps us then see our lives and failures from a new perspective. And without even realizing it, these stories will start to mess with you and change how you see the world and other people and yourself.
Now, there are different types of narrative in the Bible.
Yeah, there's historical narrative, but also narrative parables, short biographical narratives like the 4 Gospels. We'll look at all these in later videos.
Okay, next up is poetry, which honestly, I don't read a lot of.
Yeah, you're like most people. But 1 out of every 3 chapters in the Bible is poetry.
Yeah, why so much poetry?
Well, poems mainly speak through dense, creative language, linking vision the world differently. Poems use lots of metaphor to evoke your emotions and your imagination.
Lots of fancy language, but wouldn't it be easier just to tell me what I need to know?
Well, think about it. In life, we tend to form mental ruts, and we think in these familiar, well-worn, the passionate resistance poetry of the prophets.
Okay, the last big literary type is called prose discourse, and it makes up 1/4 of the Bible.
Yeah, these are speeches, letters, or essays. And the focus here is building a sequence of ideas or thoughts into one linear argument that requires a logical response. Like, hey, have you thought about this thing? You should also consider how it connects to this other thing. And if you do, then you will see that this is the result. And in light of that conclusion, therefore, you should probably stop doing that one thing so that this other thing will be the outcome.
So you're persuading me with reason.
Yeah, discourse forces you to think logically and consistently and then do something about it. Biblical discourse is found in law collections, in wisdom literature, and the letters written by the apostles.
Okay, so each book of the Bible has one literary style.
No, actually most books have a primary literary style, like narrative, for example. But then embedded in the narrative, you'll come across poems or parables or a collection of laws. Every biblical book is a unique combination of literary styles.
And to read that book well, I need to be familiar with each literary type and how it works.
Yeah, so you know what to pay attention to and what questions you should ask. But before we look at each type, there's one more unifying feature of biblical literature that's really important and really cool. And that's what we'll explore next.
All right. So like it says up there, we often talk about the Bible as a single book, but it's a library of 66 unique writings. Our first question is, what problems might we encounter if we approach the Bible as a book, reading and considering all writings the same way? No.
You expect it to be a story, I mean, beginning, middle, end. Like a storybook, a mystery book.
Yeah, so she said we expect it to be a beginning, middle, and end. So, yeah, so you read Genesis as the beginning, and then you expect there to be the climax, and then the fall, and all the way by the end, yeah. So, in the back.
We could interpret the story in different ways. So we were thinking of the book as like a historical story versus interpreting the parable.
Okay, sure. Oh. And I got to put a disclaimer on here. Matt said I didn't have to be the expert, so just making sure. So you guys get to. But no. Anybody else? So I think I'm kind of the same way as you. Like where growing up, some of the stuff didn't make sense as to why it was in the Bible, because it's like all of a sudden you're reading Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, all right, that kind of goes together, and then you hit Song of Psalms or something like that, and I'm sorry, Song of Solomon, and it's like what's this doing in here, and so I think that's part of why a lot of times it gets kind of skipped over, some of those. But question 2. All right. 2 of the styles discussed were historical narrative and parables. Is a writing any less important or authoritative if it's a parable, meaning a fictional story, versus a historical narrative, actual events? Yes.
No, I don't think it makes it any less important if we look at the Bible as what they said it should be for us. Not that we're supposed to be like those people, but we should see ourselves in those people in relation to God's love for us. And we can see that in both a fictional story or the actual events.
Yeah. And I didn't, it was Matt, I think, that kind of put it that way for me, because before, one of the ones that is always, stories that's always kind of, I guess, been a sticky spot is Jonah. Everybody goes, well, what kind of fish did he get swallowed by? Well, it's a whale, and you got all these different things that people would try to argue with or try to come up with, but is it any less important if it is a story to tell you just how to get something out of it, how to behave, how to live your life, or see something from Jonah? And is it any less the Word of God if he told it as a more of a parable versus an actual event? Does it change your relationship with Jesus and with God if it's both ways? And when he told me that, or explained it that way, I think it freed me up a lot more to kind of grow in my faith, because I guess I was always challenged with some of that, especially dealing with my job. I'm inundated by, these people who study biology and evolutional biology and stuff like that, and I try to stay out of those debates because I guess don't believe that, so it was nice to hear some of those things where I don't have to prove it. God can do it, And it doesn't make it any less important whether it's a real account of a story or if it is just a story. Yes, sir. Right, exactly. So it made it nice. So he's got us considering Luke 15, 11 through 32, and to take a look at it. Anybody else have the problem with like the alphabet or the books of the Bible? You have to actually go through the whole song to get to where you need to be. All right, 15:11, the parable of the lost son. All right, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country. He sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So, I mean, as I was reading it and thinking about whether if it was a fictional story or if it was actual events, I think the point's the exact same. We can take that lesson right out of it, either way. I don't know. Thoughts? Yes?
Well, in my Bible, these are red letters, so that's Jesus saying that. And in my mind, it doesn't matter if it's him telling a story or it's a true account that he's relating back to. He only spoke what the Father spoke or wanted him to speak, and so there's always something that I need to get from that for my own life.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that goes back to what, how Matt was explaining it, where it's still the Word of God. Like, it's directly from Him, whether it's whether it's real or just an account. Yeah. No. All right, Donnie. Oh, we lost Donnie. Oh, there he is. Oh, yes, sir.
Is there anyone else in the Bible that spoke in parables?
That's not on my answer sheet. Was there anybody else in the Bible who spoke in parables?
Or wrote in parables.
Uh,
The priest who came to David to tell him, confronted with his sin, told the story about the person who had a pet sheep.
oh, yeah.
Somebody, that was a parable.
Yeah. I mean, if we stretch it, what's that? I'm sorry. Prophet Nathan. Oh, yeah. Now, I would even say, could you stretch it a little bit as far as interpreting the dreams of others? You know, it wasn't an actual event that happened, but it was an illusion or a literary, type of thing. So, I'd go with that. If I was your teacher, I'd check it. Okay. So, all right. What problems might we encounter in ignoring the literary style we are reading? Reading the Sermon on the Mount in the same way as Revelation. Yes, sir.
I think it'd be easy to, like some of the imagery in Revelation, if you take it too literally, and then try to build a whole body of truth around something that was never meant to be taken literal. Just like, just example that comes on my mind is Revelation talks about all the stars in heaven are falling to the earth and like destroy like a portion of the earth. Well, if even one star got within a million miles of the earth, it would burn up.
Sure.
So obviously that was some kind of a imagery that was to make a point. It wasn't to be taken literally.
Yeah.
And so you have to. I think parables and a lot of imagery like that. If you take every detail of it and try to make it like equal to gospel truth, you get into trouble. Trying to you start establish things as truth that can never that won't bear out in the rest of the scripture.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going. Like, if I tried to think of Revelation as, like you said, like everything in that is happened or going, is literal translation. Like, I don't know if I could do that. So, comparing it to the Sermon on the Mount, where that is right from Jesus. No. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Just one other thought on Revelation, and I'm sure no expert on Revelation at all, but I do remember that part of the language and imagery, of course, is taken from the Old Testament. A lot of times they use the term Babylon instead of Rome.
Oh,
It was kind of designed to be able to pass that book around among the Christians, and if it fell into the hands of the Romans, they probably wouldn't have a clue what it's about because it wasn't. It said things in a way that the church would understand, but not that the enemies would understand.
yeah. And this is kind of on the, with the style. I think we got to take into account too, a lot of times, what audience was that book written for, and their cultural, their culturally, what did they believe in? What was going on around them? Just to really understand what's going on with that book. So. All right, Mr. Donnie. Oh, sorry, question? Sure. So, all right, let's see what's.
You're most likely familiar with the 10 Commandments in the Bible, stuff we generally take as good advice. Don't murder, don't steal, honor your parents, the list goes on.
And those are just the first 10. There are actually a total of 613 commands, all given to ancient Israel, found in the first 5 books of the Bible, which in Hebrew are called the Torah.
Now, the word Torah is usually translated in English as the law, because it has all of these laws in it. And as you read through them, you wonder, am I supposed to obey some of these, all of these? I mean, what's the purpose of the law?
Well, that translation is kind of confusing because while the Torah has laws in it, the book itself is fundamentally a story about how God is creating new kinds of people who are fully able to love God and love others. And when Jesus taught about the Torah, he said that he was bringing that story to its fulfillment.
So, walk me through the story and how it's fulfilled.
So the story begins with God creating humanity who rebels. And God chooses Abraham to bless all of the nations through his family, who end up in slavery down in Egypt, and so God rescues them. Then at Mount Sinai, God makes a covenant with Israel, like an agreement. And all of the laws that Moses gives to Israel are the terms of that agreement. They're like a constitution. And so some of the laws, they're about rituals and customs that set Israel apart from the nations. Other laws are about social justice or morality. And by following these, Israel would show the other nations what God is like.
Okay, so the rest of the Torah is just the complete list of laws that Moses gives Israel?
No, the rest of the Torah just continues the story. And the 613 commands are only a selection from that original constitution. And even these have been broken up and placed at strategic points within the story. Now pay attention, because you'll see a really clear pattern. Moses gives the first laws to Israel.
Yeah, don't worship other gods, don't make idols.
And then right after that, there's a story of Israel breaking those very laws.
Yeah, they worship the golden calf.
And so Moses gives some more laws, and then you get more stories of rebellion. Some more laws, rebellion again, some more laws, more rebellion, and you start to see the point.
Right, no matter how many laws, they're just going to continue to rebel.
So at the conclusion of the Torah's story, Moses gives this final speech to Israel as they prepare to go into their new home. And he tells them, you guys, I know that you're not going to follow all of God's laws. You've proven to me that you're incapable. And Moses says the problem is that their hearts are hard and that they're going to need new, transformed hearts if they're ever going to truly follow God's law. And he was right. I mean, the story goes on to recount Israel's total failure.
They go into the land, they break all the laws.
Right. Now, the next section of books in the Jewish tradition are the 15 books of the prophets, and they reflect back on the story. For example, Ezekiel, he said that if Israel was ever going to obey the law, God's Spirit would have to transform their hard hearts into soft hearts. And Jeremiah said that's when obedience to God's commands wouldn't feel like a duty, but they would be written deep in their hearts. And Isaiah, he promised a future leader, Israel's Messiah, who will lead all of the people in obedience to the law. Now, in Jewish tradition, all of these books together are called the prophets, even the historical books, because they're continuing the story told from the perspective of the prophets.
Okay, so we have the law and the prophets, and they're telling one connected story about God's desire to bless the whole world through a people, Israel, who it turns out needs a new heart.
Yes, and Jesus saw himself as continuing that story. So he agreed with the law and the prophets when he taught that it's out of the human heart that come the most ugly parts of human nature. It's like the default setting of our hearts is opposed to God's law. But Jesus also said that he came to solve that problem, and in his words, to fulfill the law.
So what does he mean there, to fulfill the law?
Well, first he said that the demand of all of the laws in the Torah could be fulfilled by what he called the Great Command, that we are to love God and to love others.
So that seems pretty easy. I mean, we all want to love.
Well, we think we want to love. But Jesus showed how love is far more demanding than we realize. So he quotes the law, do not murder. And he says, yes, not killing someone is a very loving thing to do. But then he also says that when you treat someone with disrespect or when you nurse resentment against them, you're also violating God's moral ideal because you're not treating that person with love. And so Jesus said true love ought to extend even to our own enemies. So even though this command seems very simple, Jesus showed how our hearts are not currently equipped to fulfill even this basic command of God to love others.
And that's kind of a downer.
But where Israel failed, Jesus brought this story to its fulfillment. As Israel's Messiah, he fully loved God and others, and he showed all of the nations what God is truly like. He did this through his acts of compassion and mercy, and ultimately by loving his enemies even unto death. And after his resurrection, he told his followers that he would send God's Spirit to transform their hearts so that they could follow him and fulfill the purpose of the law, to love God and to love their neighbor. So this fulfills the story of the law and the prophets, or in the words of the Apostle Paul, the one who loves fulfills the law.
All right. So the Hebrew word Torah is often translated as law in your Bible, but it's also translated as teaching or instruction in the Bible. Do these other two translations change the way you consider biblical law? And if so, why? Yes, Larry.
Law sounds a little more intimidating than teaching or instruction. And we know that under Christ, we're not required to keep the law in order to be acceptable to God, but we still gain wisdom and instruction as a good way to live, a way that pleases God, but not a way to satisfy God's demands. Because Jesus did that for us.
And that's kind of where, when I first read it, I was thinking, the law seems so black and white. Yeah, cut and dry. That's probably a better way to say it. And teaching, there's learning involved in that, or instruction. There's learning, and we're giving you the guidelines, and you're going to get better over time. So, yes, in the back.
I think the word teaching or instruction also gives you the idea that there is growth, personal growth, whereas law makes it seem like once you're broke the law or broke these rules,
If you don't obey the law, there's almost always a consequence.
Sure. For those of you, if you couldn't hear, she said, if you don't, with law, generally we understand there's always going to be some sort of consequence. And I'm going to put a little word in there, generally a negative consequence too. I haven't yet been pulled over and the police have given me money for speeding. So maybe one day, but so I have got to teach my kids good lessons in citizenship, though. That's a positive. So on how to be respectful to police officers. So officer friendly, if you're out there listening, thanks. So yeah. So I think you're right. Were you going to say something?
I was just thinking that it seems like there's a choice with what you do with teaching or instruction, but the law is the law.
Mm-hmm.
God has given us free will, so he wants to teach us and he wants us to choose him versus just obeying the law so we don't get in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else got? Yes, sir.
You know, some of the things that you're talking about and everything depends on if I'm gonna take it under my understanding or the Word of God's understanding. Because I can alter it in my mind. I can conveniently change it and conform it to what fits me real well. It's kind of contradictory to what Jesus says about these mysteries. They've been revealed to those who are seeking after them. And they're inspired, the Word of God's inspired by God to correct us and improve us and equip us in the forms of perfection to do good works. And some of those other questions you were asking, the Old Testament is illustrations to let us search ourselves and see where we fit in. Situations and situations. And people get challenging situations, a lot of them have in the Old Testament. Some of them made good choices of how they
Yeah.
That's intellectual foolishness. You know, an individual will either believe this and want to apply it and search for it, because that's who Jesus says he gives it to, the understanding, so they can be better and grow and mature and everything. Or we can just keep trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. Oh. Thought I saw somebody's hand in the back. No? All right. All right, Donnie. All right. Jesus went throughout Galilee teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. And then when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. And I think there's another part to that. Here we go. Would you consider Jesus' teachings to be Torah? Why or why not? And I think we're using the translation of Torah being a law there. So, yes, ma'am.
Jesus overcame the law.
Mhm.
Because that's why the whole purpose he came, because nobody was good enough to be able to follow the law to the letter. So God sent Jesus as a propitiation for sin.
Yeah,
I think
yeah. I definitely could see that. Yes, sir.
Here we go again. Law. The Bible clearly describes the importance of why it was given. We wouldn't have a clue what was right and wrong about it. Okay, we still have to make a decision whether we're going to conform to it or we're going to reject it and do our own thing. Jesus came to fulfill the law, but in his prophecy, he came to give us life. If human beings would have paid attention, all of God's people in the Old Testament, I always wondered, would Jesus have even needed to show up? Because he showed up because it was our last time. If we go back and mention Revelations, do we believe that he's coming? Do we believe he's going to actually be here? And he's going to look at each and every one of us and let us know the reality of what God has seen with us, whether we're going to be happy or not, whether we're going to be followers, whether we're not. All these are choices, both sides of the fence. I think it's Romans. Matt was in Romans last week, and I think it's over the 6th chapter, 6:23. We have to make a decision who we're going to serve. We can serve sin unto death. Death is a separation. Or we can serve God, which leads into eternal life.
Mhm.
And if we get rid of the spirit of fear that tries to dominate human beings, that life is not worth living with Jesus, it's better to live without it so you can enjoy all this other stuff. Then, as the parables say, maybe our eyes aren't open, maybe our ears aren't open because we're not looking or hearing or seeing the consequences of other people that's engaged in these kind of behaviors, and all they've had is misery
Mhm.
and everything. So that's why it says, he who has an eye, let him see, and he that has an ear, let him hear.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's. I think this is the where now the scholars debating these things, as you know. What's that? He didn't give me his sign, you know. So that's, you know, like you said, like she said over here, Jesus fulfilled the law. He overcame it. So if you're looking at Torah as law, I don't know, but I mean, your point is very true too. You know, all these things, and so Larry's got something for us here.
I mean, just a couple thoughts. I mean, Paul made it clear in Galatians that the law was never given as a way to find our way to God. It was given to show us our sinfulness and to help people realize that they needed
Yeah.
Then you can see if you keep that. But he came to give us a whole new way to God through his sacrifice of grace.
Yeah. And that's, something that really just kind of opened my eyes to stuff is what you said is what the first time I heard that God gave the law to show that we can't uphold the law, that we're never going to be good enough and we need him. Growing up, I always thought, like, my goodness, it seemed, again, it was that Old Testament is all fire and brimstone, the vengeful God type of thing, and set these strict laws, and it's like, man, that is, whoo, I'm glad God changed, but God didn't change at all. It was just our understanding, how we understood and how he fulfilled, how he laid out his plan so that we can see how it was fulfilled through Jesus. Pretty lady in the back. She's my wife, by the way, so I guess that.
As far as the law, I was also thinking that part of the Torah was to set apart his people, God's people, to help them to look differently, act differently, dress differently, eat different food, to make this, to culturally be set apart from all the other people who were not following the one true God. And so, kind of to continue on with that thought process as far as the Torah and Jesus' teaching and stuff, I always think of, I don't know that this is necessarily right or wrong, but I have a tendency to think of the Torah as being taken more as this literal sense, this literal law. You shall not eat, whatever it was, you clean and unclean and
No
all
bacon.
the very literal meaning. But I feel like when Jesus came, he was saying, the point isn't that actual law itself, but the point is the important part is the meaning of the law. So you have the literal law, and then you have the essence of the law, and then I typically think, again, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but in my mind, I think that Jesus was more trying to get us into the spirit of the law versus like now that hopefully we are set apart in the way we behave and how we treat others and maybe not how we eat anymore, but that Jesus was more focused on like the spirit of the law versus the actual words of the law.
And I think you're onto something there because, especially by Jesus' time, they had taken human ideas of God's laws to extremes. When you were talking about that, I was thinking of when Jesus healed on the Sabbath, and they had taken it to such an extreme, like, of, oh, you got to rest, you can't work, and that wasn't really the point. Yes, sir.
The more I sit here and think about that, I would say, why not? Because the law was developed back in the Old Testament. It was ministered, it was pointed out. There's always consequences to law, and most of it's usually punishment, correction. Over in the New Testament, Jesus, he comes with grace and mercy. He's not enforcing law. He's not changing. He came to let us
Yes, sir.
You bring up a good point. I've been thinking about this since we started talking about this. Jesus is the grace to the law.
Oh, yeah. For those of you who didn't hear, he said that Jesus is the grace to the law. So that's actually really good. I like it.
You know, one other thing to add to that we should all pay attention to, grace doesn't give us a license to do what we want or sin.
Amen.
Sure.
It says that.
Yeah.
It teaches us that. We can choose to do that. That's why I said earlier, we all have magnificent minds and can get everything to conform to who? Me. Well, me's blocking me from God if I just follow God the Lord. When he brought that there out, the grace is the thing that helps us to grow and mature spiritually to be fit when he comes back in the Revelation.
Yeah. And I like to think of grace is there because God knows that we're fallible, and it's, like you said, not so that we can do whatever we want. When we accept Jesus and when we're baptized and when we want to change, we should always be trying to do better. And the grace is there for when we stumble, when we do make that mistake. We don't have to be like, back in the law. It's like, well, you broke the law, so give me your right hand. We've got that grace to just move, do better that next time, to learn and go from there.
This is wonderful. Grace, now let's move a little bit. Where's the mercy come in? When you were talking about the prodigal son, the grace was there, given the individual time to change his ways. The mercy was welcoming home without punishment. Let's celebrate that you're home and you're going to live a good life. And we put it together.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know that there's always not punishment. But I mean, there's consequences, but the mercy is you don't deserve it, and you still get forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for sins, there are going to be consequences. If you murder somebody, okay, there's going to be a consequence to that. Christ says, your sins are forgiven, go and sin no more. Well, we're all going to do that. Mercy is we don't deserve it, but we're going to get that forgiveness.
Yeah. So, and I lost my train. It came off the track. Sorry. It was a very good point that you had. So, no, it was with you, and I. Sorry. Sometimes I just get butterflies. So, yes, Larry. Sorry. That was a very good point, though. Yeah.
I like the story that my prodigal son, I think it shows really grace is so much even beyond what we would think of mercy. Mercy would say, yeah, come on home, son, spend a little time in your room and think about what you did. And grace said, hey, let's have a party, kill the fatted calf, and gave him really the opposite of what he deserved.
Yeah.
It was something totally unexpected, totally uncalled for by any kind of logical, legal system. God threw out the rules and said, we're gonna rejoice in this son of mine that's come home, and I'm not gonna start lecturing you.
Yeah. No. I remembered what it was. You were talking about. There is that consequence with the sin and the prodigal son. He had his consequence. He was eating pig food, or he was living with the pigs. And I've been around pig farms. They're not nice. So so that is he was in squalor and had to face that consequence. And once he realized that he just couldn't be out without his father, without God, and came back, that grace and the mercy came in to play. And the rest of that stuff, you're not with the pigs anymore. You've got a robe, you've got a ring, we've got a fattened calf to eat. So, yeah. All right, Donnie, you awake back there? Sorry, I can't read that. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets, but I have come to abolish them have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. And I think we've kind of already hit on that a couple times already, that he came to show what the laws were supposed to, what they were supposed to be. They were supposed to be treating your neighbor with respect, with love, I think not murdering your neighbor is probably the minimum requirement for showing respect, and love. So, that is, yeah. So, all right, next, Donnie. The one who loves fulfills the law. So how can we fulfill the law and show our neighbors what Jesus is like? Share some examples when you've seen this done well. Mm-hmm. Anybody got some good examples of when you've seen this done before, done well?
Basics, mow your neighbor's lawn,
Sure.
shovel their driveway. We've got lots of old neighbors in our neighborhood, and a lot of people step up and help with mowing lawns, raking leaves, that kind of thing, bringing food.
Sure.
So yeah.
I would say I saw this when we did Hurricane Katrina relief. Going down. Now, it wasn't. I don't think that a lot of the guys in my unit were probably like, "Oh, I'm going to go down and help because Jesus wanted me to." But there was, I think God has put in us all that we should treat others, others well and with love. And you just saw that with all the volunteers that came out, all the guys who, we had 12 hours notice, got on a plane and we're down in Mississippi handing out food and water, clearing trees and brush and things. And, the electricians that volunteer to go down and put up the poles to get power restored, they don't have to do that, and they do. Yes, ma'am.
Let's bring that down and make it more real right here in our church. Every Sunday I see this happen because I have people that will come and open the doors for me, people who will make sure that I can get through the crowd and so on. This is every day just automatic showing his love. And sometimes we make it has to be a big thing. It's the small things that really set this church apart. And people who come into this church
It probably does show more of somebody's true heart, the truly trying to live out Jesus's command and showing his love when you do those small things. We'll have to think on that one more.
I think it takes an incredible amount of intentionality and awareness of what's going on around you. I mean, you're not going to wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, I hope there's somebody on the side of the road that I can help with a flat tire." But you're open to seeing those opportunities where God is leading you to be able to be His hands and feet.
That's a very good point. And sorry, now I'm pondering something off of that. That's good. That's another thinker. Oh, yes, sir.
I'm not one that likes to pat himself on the back to have the ability to do what's right. And we had that ice
Mm-hmm.
Depends on how we look at it. Are we talking about the Bible literal or is it down to earth?
Yeah. So, I tell you, it's something that have to continue growing on, but it's, I think, also the best way to show Jesus. So, yes, sir.
One other thing, praise the Lord for your testimony. I wouldn't be half the man I am without this wife here. She puts good wisdom in my ears, and maybe I'm just a little bit too male egotistical to comprehend. No. And she says, well, Tom, you know the Lord wants you to do that, and don't you understand some people don't have the blessings you have or the marbles you have? So don't get egotistical about it, just go out and be kind. It's a challenge sometimes. My worst enemy is my own expectations. When are they gonna wake up and come on?
Yeah.
It's all about listening.
Yeah.
Hearing the Holy Spirit's prompting in us. That's where it all boils down to, is listening to the Holy Spirit's prompting us and following through.
And yes, and listening to your wife. Very good with. All right. Yes.
I think there's also the opposite side, which is being open to receiving the blessings from somebody else. So receiving, I don't know, biblically, there's a story of Jesus receiving things. Well, and I guess
Washing his feet with her hair.
yeah.
Yep.
And the oil, he received that, but so that was wonderful for him, but that was a blessing that she was able to give to Jesus or to somebody else. So if, like, your neighbor wants to cut down your tree, or cut up your tree, help you, and allowing them to do that. I think speaks a lot as well.
Hmm. And Beth can probably tell you, if I saw a neighbor just come up in my yard and start doing something, I'd be like, what is that guy doing in my yard? So, get out of here. What's that? Yeah, yeah. So, but, all right, it is 7:30. So, we will close in prayer and then you guys can go. Oh, all right. Sorry. Believe it or not, we actually didn't get through everything, so that was good. Oh. All right. Sorry, Matt wanted. All right. Well, he had something, and I can't find it. So, all right, we'll just close. Lord, thank you for this time we could come together and just discuss things with you. I thank you for the fact that we don't have to be an expert, but we can learn from each other. We can share ideas. As we go forth from here, let's please help us to show your love, show Jesus' love to others. Help those who need a little extra boost to do that, and just continue to bless those who that is the talent that you have given them. Thank you for this church and our church family, and in your name, amen. All right. So,
One quick thing.
yes, sir.
If you didn't get your e-news from Lacey, from the office, that she normally sends out on Wednesdays, the Constant Contacts app that she uses blocked all Gmail and all Yahoo accounts
Oh,
from getting their emails. She had 150 of them fail, and about 10 of them got through. So if you didn't get it, that's why you didn't get it. She's working with them and trying to figure out what's going on.
interesting. And this is our last Wednesday night for summer. Yes. So thank you for spending it with me. Thank you, sir. You're welcome. Oh. All right.